Meow 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 meow. Meow 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 meow. Meow 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 meow. A hot dog. Hey. Hey. So, in order to help me relax, I'm going to help you all relax also. This voice will massage you.
Welcome to Dalek Relaxation for Humans. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Now exhale through your mouth softly. Focus on slowing down your breathing into a calm rhythm. Inhale. You are becoming more and more calm. Exhale. You are feeling more and more relaxed. Inhale. Calm. Exhale. Relaxed. Inhale. Calm. Exhale. Relaxed. Inhale. Calm. Exhale. Relaxed. Continue to breathe slowly and calmly. The aches and stresses of daily life are floating away. Your tension has been exterminated. Exterminated!
I feel so much better now. I feel so much better. Thanks for coming to my talk, my TED Talk. So, hi, I'm Leslie. Hi. Hi, thanks for coming to my talk. So it's entitled, that's a little close, Blue Blood Injection, Transitioning Red to Purple. It is an IRL story about me, and hopefully can give y'all some tips. That would be real good if it did. And also featuring Pokemon. The whole thing has Pokemon because Pokemon are great. So, who is this talk for? It's for Pikachu. And it's also for smaller businesses. I've worked for huge companies. I've worked with companies that do work with Fortune 10. I've worked with companies of 10 people. This is more catered towards those small companies that can't quite cover both on their own. It'll happen. Also, my story is going to give you some ideas, hopefully. If you're just waiting for bullet points, use your ears. These talks aren't just full of words, or these slides rather. The end does have some suggestions in bullet points, but that's just there. So some backstory time for me, just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. So here we go. So I used to be a Linux administrator for 4 years. And last year I did a talk here about things you should not be doing on command line, but that was really embarrassing for me and everyone else, so I'm not doing that talk again. So when I was a Linux admin, I used to remove malware manually. So going into SQL databases and actually removing pieces of iterated malware that had gone through the database and eventually destroyed them, and doing a lot of looking through logs and seeing if I could find the cause of hacks and addressing abuse reports, a whole bunch of stuff. And that was because we didn't have the capability to have a full security team. You know, we're a web host. I'm a Linux admin. Nobody wants to do security, so they kind of shoved me into it. I was like, oh, this sucks. And so I went to DEF CON 22. That was my first DEF CON, certainly not as far back as some of y'all. And I go out on the patio, and there are some red teamers there. And I can tell they're red teamers because I'm talking to them outside about what I do. And I was like, hey, you know, I resolve abuse reports. I stop child exploitation online. I do all this stuff. I remove malware. And the thing they said to me that stuck with me for years was that I was an internet janitor. that I was just cleaning up the trash on the internet. I wasn't doing real security. And the phrase internet janitor really stuck with me for a while. I kind of had to leave, couldn't handle it. And so from then on, I hated pen testing. I was like, these are pen testers. These are the type of people that are going to tell me that what I do is worthless. And so I hated pen testing until I went to HaHa, which is Houston Area Hackers Anonymous. That totally stole its name from AHA, the Austin one, but you know, we all can't be perfect. So I went to HaHa and ended up meeting one of my friends and mentors, Aaron, and he said, you know, you look like you could be a pen tester. And I immediately took offense to that. I was like, what do you mean I could be a pen tester? That's so rude. So, you know, I thought about it, and he said that it's because I actually went inside servers. He actually said that what I was doing was blue team, and before then, and I had never thought about it that way. I was just a Linux admin cleaning up stuff. And so I was like, okay, maybe I could be a pen tester. And so here I was, just a pen tester, me fluffing around being entirely cute. Pen testing, vuln assessments, the whole shebang, everything that a red teamer does, except for actually red teaming. I didn't do that. So eventually I moved from a mid-sized web host to a very large consulting company, and just working with gigantic companies and seeing a whole bunch of stuff. It was awesome, but I was doing nothing but offensive work. I wasn't doing anything to defend against it. So I said, I'm tired of working for a big old company. And someone I knew in the Austin area said, hey, do you want to come work for my company? And do you want to be a pen tester? And their company was, at the time, I think 13 to 15 people. That was everybody. That wasn't just security. That was engineers, sales, everybody. So now I have to do both. And here is when we get to the actual meat and potatoes of the story. So I have to do both. And I was not prepared for this. Said, I was hired as a pen tester. This is annoying. I don't want to be a blue team. I don't want to be a blue team. I can't believe I just said that. But I essentially was. There were only 2 consultants. I'm so offensive and offended. So I had to take on the duties of blue team also, because there were 2 of us, only 2 people, me and one other person. And I had kind of a crisis because I wasn't doing blue team stuff before, and if I was, it was just cleaning it up after the fact. I didn't have any IR experience. I didn't have any other experience besides that. We had a NOC at the old job, and they kind of took care of it, and that's really weird that also a NOC would do that and not a SOC, right? We rarely hear that. So I go to my boss and I say, you hired me to be a pen tester. Why am I having to suddenly get pushed into doing defensive work? And he said, I hired you because you can do this. You can do this. Tell yourself you're a badass. And he made me say it out loud. And he made me say it out loud at team meetings every week after that, which was super embarrassing for me. But I did it. And I did it. I actually, because I'm a badass. Badass. You're all badasses. We're all badasses. So here I am having to learn blue team stuff. And I hated it. It made me really uncomfortable. Really, really uncomfortable. And later I learned that if you're uncomfortable learning, it's because you're learning it and you're doing it well. If you do something and you're like, oh, this is easy, you're probably not going as in-depth as you think you are. So when I started doing blue and red team together, I had to be flexible. I had to write policies, which I was like, oh, this sucks too. I hate this. But it made me learn, and I hate these acronyms so much, SOC 2 compliance and NIST 800-53. and ISO 27001, all a bunch of policies that all companies have to, cater to and work with. Even if we don't want to hear these acronyms, that's what we have to learn. So I did, and I had to download the PDFs, cost this thing is like $85 at NIST for 800-53, and started learning these as well to write these policies. And I wrote policies from scratch. It was great. I think the only one I didn't was NIST 853 because heck, that one's so huge. But outside of writing policies, I also did baby's first threat modeling. So threat modeling was a really good way for me to look objectively at a system from the outside and see its endpoints and see how it connected to everything, and working directly with the engineers when I finished the threat modeling to say, here are your shortcomings. Here are the things that you are not prepared to secure. And they also showed what they were prepared to secure. And that kind of gave them an insight that says, hey, we're ready to secure against like 75% of this stuff, but we don't know about this stuff, and we know we can't handle this. And that was a really good way also to see how engineers, and to get them to see how their system has innate vulnerabilities that I don't even have to check for as a pen tester. They just know are there. And you'll sometimes get that in scoping meetings if you're a pen tester. If you're really lucky, they'll tell you what they know is going to fail, and it doesn't happen very often. I think they're kind of embarrassed by it, but that's not bringing value to them, If they just pretend that everything's hunky-dory and they're not going to get popped, that doesn't help them, right? And it doesn't help you either if you're doing a white box pen test where everything's out in the open and they're supposed to give you diagrams. So also during this time outside of threat modeling, I had used threat modeling to pump information. Oh, and it's warm. Oh. Tradition. Oh, there's a little left one. And again, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That's it. Oh. Hold on. Threat modeling, I obviously didn't do today. So we pumped the information from threat modeling into a card game, tabletop card game. And I know some of you have heard about tabletop exercises. It's a very military procedure of going through and rigidly, here's what we do, what do you do? Oh, that's not so well. And what we did was we ended up creating a card game. And the way the card game worked was we took the results from threat modeling, things that they knew they had shortcomings on, and made red team cards out of them. And we played in 3. And some of them might have red herrings. There we go. Some of them they couldn't defend against because we had made them blind intentionally. It just says you can't see what we're doing. And sometimes that'll happen. And they would have to play their blue team card, and they had unlimited actions. They could do whatever they needed to do, and that was, within the constraints of the game. We didn't want to do something like, you have 8 hours a turn, and so you need only 3 turns per day, and you can only do 3 things. That's not realistic. So so they're playing blue team cards, and that really gave them a chance to test their IR procedures and other escalation procedures against what an attacker would do, and what an attacker would do on the things they knew that they couldn't secure. So that was really fun. I love games. I love card games, board games, tabletop, video games, anything. And introducing and creating a card game that was super fun is really hard to make the rules make sense, but it was really fun, and that was a nice way of integrating what I had done as an offensive security person with the actual engineers who were doing blue team work. And so at this point, I was purple team. I was fulfilling both roles of offensive and defensive work at this point. I know a lot of purple teams, you'll have folks working together jointly in one org, but when you're two people, you kind of have to do it yourself. So, you know, here I am doing both roles. It was kind of cool. So it doesn't have to be really rigid. You don't have to go through and you don't have to be by the letter for it. You have to do what comes naturally for it to work together and make sense for you if you're just one person. If I were, say, blue team and had to work in an org and we had to work, when you're a small company, you can't afford to hire a pen test, really, right? Pen tests are expensive. Pen testers are kind of worth it in a way, and I'm not self-aggrandizing, I hope, but there's a lot of manual work that goes into it. May as well just do a vuln assessment. And a normal company who's trying to make ends meet every quarter can't afford that. So when you're working at a small company, it's good to kind of take on both roles because you need to. And it sucks, but you have to do it. Your company can't, you need to be secure on both ends, yep? So here are some suggestions that I have, going back to what I talked about when I first worked for that small company. So again, the boring acronyms for sample, keep some sample IR procedures around. There are a lot of sites. I think SANS also has this where you have a 1-2 sheet IR procedure. And that's really helpful already. That gives you a good baseline of what to start with for, tiers of escalation, and they've got some blank spots on who you can contact. And if you have like 10, 20, 30 people on your team, you can still fill those in. You're gonna have someone who's your immediate supervisor. You're gonna have someone who's maybe in charge of your product or your network, just one IT person. You can still put them on there. You can still escalate to them. So again, these boring acronyms, SOC 2, ISO, NIST, ABC. Go ahead and just download those compliances if you're working red team especially. You're gonna have to suss through it to get full value. There are a lot of summaries of them on key points that you need to follow. A lot of them are very long, but they're free. You can download them if you need to do compliance. Here's some bullet points. They'll do that for you as well. It's going to be a net negative if you have to read the entire thing, and if your org is small, you don't have time. You don't want to have time. So get requirements for your industry. So what you're doing, who your clients are. If you're doing consulting work of any kind, if you sell software, you're going to have that information ready. And I'm sorry, this is like super helpful. It's a low-hanging fruit. It takes 5 minutes to download this. You can do it. And this is Swampert, by the way. It's a blue team and rock type or ground type, so he's also very defensive. It's good. So Microsoft Threat Modeling Tool. This is a free resource that Microsoft offers. You download it. It's a standalone application. Requires no license for the app. I didn't say that for Windows. You totally need a license to use Windows. So it walks you through. You can actually create a diagram called a data flow diagram. of all your points, all your endpoints, all your SQL databases. Do you have a VPN? Well, it draws like a nice little line around it for you, and you set it up exactly how your org is set up, how your product is set up, and it will go through and create a list of any endpoints touching at all in any direction that you have specified and say, hey, here are some potential things that might happen. And you can go through and say, well, we know about this one, we know about this one. This one we don't know about, so you can put a check mark there, and eventually you'll print out a report and say, here's some things we need to look at. And when you're doing red team, this actually helps engineers that you work with. If you're working for a small company, it's free. I think for like a medium-sized product, I think it took it about 10 hours to do. Plug everything in, and then you have a nice chart of what it looks like. And it's actually kind of nice to see what things look at from the top. And not everyone has that. So Vuln Scanner, not Nessus. I love Nessus. It is very expensive. There are a lot of free Vuln scanners out there. They're not, I will say this, they're not going to be as comprehensive. But when you have very few people, you need to take advantage of what's out there. Warden Scanner is another one, slightly less expensive. What's that? Warden Scanner. That's another good one, much less expensive. But good Vuln scanners are, you pay for what you get. And again, take stock of what you have covered. If you have IT, if you have admins, that's great. Do you have dev? Is your dev doing DevSecOps, or are they just writing the code and then going somewhere else? So that's going to actually help you say, hey, what do I need to take care of? Where can I fill in those gaps? One last suggestion here, UT San Antonio's Cyber Threat Defender. This is a card game, and it's free. Or sorry, not free. It's, I think, $20. But it's also under Creative Commons license. So you can play this with anyone, and you don't have to give, you don't sell it, but you can play it. You can play it with anyone as long as you don't sell the cards to somebody else. And so these cards are, to be fair, a little cheesy. You've got your little icon for Firewall, and it's totally like cyber 90s graphics for Firewall, and it looks like Digimon cards or Pokemon cards, and you play against each other, and you build up your network, and you have other cards to attack. So that's also helpful working for clients. Working for your team, if you're working on a small team, it gives them a really good insight to what's going on both sides. And again, that is really cheap and Creative Commons, so you don't have to worry about using it within your company. And last note on that, it's really helpful for kids. I will say that if you have kids that you're trying to teach about security, kids love card games. I love card games also, but that's me. But it'll give them a really good insight as to what security does. Hey, this is what somebody who's bad might try to do. This is what I can do to stop them. This is how a firewall works. It's not magic. It doesn't stop everything. I know, right? That's really weird. So I want to thank everyone for coming to my talk. Thank you so much. Thanks DerbyCon for accepting my talk. Second year in a row. Really means a lot. And thanks everyone for coming. I'm Leslie again. My Twitter handle is Benevolist. And thanks again. So any questions at all?
Did you finish that ice?
There's like, how much? Thanks. Yeah, what's up?
So you know that card game, so is it technically, if you use it with a client, but they're paying for a service, is that illegal?
You're not selling them the card game at cost.
Using the card game with the client.
That's fine.
Okay.
It's Creative Commons. The card game actually has their licensing on it, and under Creative Commons that is allowed use because you're still attributing them for the game. Yes.
Good talk. Quick question.
Thank you.
The remediation aspect, do you have to do that at all in this hybrid?
I couldn't. I've worked for like some of the big companies I had. They had whole remediation teams, which I had never heard of. I worked for a big oil and gas company, and they had, I think, 15 people doing remediation for them, and that's absurd to think about. What you have to do as a security person is bring to them the things that you find. It's up to them to prioritize them. You can help them. You can kind of guide them and say, like, well, this one's going to lead to a really big breach. But at the end of the day, it's your management, it's the other orgs surrounding it that have to give that gravitas to say, hey, you need to do this. So, no, I couldn't do remediation, but I recommended a lot of things. Anyone else? Meow? Okay, thank you.